Phantasm IV, Oblivion. Yes, we are back for the fourth installment and what we thought was, for quite a long time, the final installment for the Phantasm series. This movie came out in 1994. It stars everybody from the third movie. Well, everybody that was a main character in the third movie. The kid, Tim, has disappeared. Um, Rocky's gone. It's just Reggie. It's Reggie, Jody, Mike, and the tall man. But it's kind of cool because it's still them, and it's a really different movie, and probably because the budget was cut way down. Phantasm 2 had a $2 million budget. Phantasm 1 had a $1.6 million budget. This movie had a $650,000 budget. And that's a lot for a studio-driven movie to cut. And it shows. And it's weird that it's the fourth movie in the franchise, and the budget just went down the hill. Almost like they decided they wanted you to make the movie, but you only get this amount of money, and we'll see how you do with it. All in all, I think Coscarelli pulled it off. But let's get into the movie. The movie starts off with Michael driving, and he's driving and driving and driving, and there's a then it goes into a flashback of all the older movies that leads up to why Michael's doing what he's doing, and it mostly for budgetary constraints. It looks like the intro to, say, the summary intro to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when they talk about how everything's set up in this world, and that's what we're doing. But it's Reggie talking, and he's giving a play-by-play of how they got to where they are right now.
His evil spread like a plague, destroying towns, maiming and killing. We called him the Tall Man. At first we thought he was just an undertaker. His hordes pillaged graveyards and spirited off the dead to a place worse than hell. My name is Reggie. I was an ice cream vendor by trade. Now, I'm a soldier. A soldier in a war against his army of the living dead.
We snap right back to where Reggie was pinned against the wall from the third movie with all the spheres, and the tall man comes to finish him off, and he lets him go. And he lets him go because of a lot that happens in this movie. The tall man wants him to continue his work and gives him all those cryptic messages.
Small man, your end approaches, but it is not yet. Take great care how you play. The final game now begins.
And as soon as he gives them those cryptic messages, you see the hallway, and a bunch of CGI Sentinel spheres come flying out of the mausoleum. No longer are these. We're in the 90s now, so everything's CG. We find out that Michael's driving southeast, away from Oregon, where the majority of the series has taken place. His drive to defeat the tall man, pun intended, and not become his tool is shown in the intensity of his face. He's really determined to get to where he is. While he's driving, he has a flashback of one of the last really good days he had as a kid before all this happened, which is really kind of cool. This movie uses all of the, well, not all of, but a lot of the footage that Coscarelli didn't get to use for the first Phantasm film. As I talked about in the first one, he originally had it set for over 3 hours, so there's a ton of footage, a ton of deleted scenes, and they actually use it a lot in this movie, including this flashback scene where Michael as a kid, his favorite memory basically is sneaking onto Reggie's truck and stealing a popsicle. Reggie sees him in the rearview mirror, just smirks at him. But it's really cool to see the same characters from that are all grown up and stuff, in 1994 being able to be used in 1978. It's kind of it's almost like it was meant to be that way, even though it wasn't. It was a long, arduous task to get to the cool, like, let's bring everything back idea of Phantasm IV. He gets his head back together, and he starts seeing people in the back of this hearse that he's driving, which is the tall man's hearse. I forgot to mention that he stole the tall man's hearse from the third movie. But he sees a strange figure in the back that looks very much like the Slender Man. Could have started here in 1994, people. But he blinks, and the vision's gone, and he looks to the side, and then there's the creepy grandmother from the original movie, the psychic lady, and she just laughs hysterically for no reason, and then just goes away. Reggie had a flat on his car, and while he's fixing it, Bald Jody shows up and morphs back into Jody and tries to convince Reggie to go after Michael, even though he was told not to follow him. Hesitantly, Reggie listens to Jody and starts heading southeast. All right, back to Michael and his hearse. He's driving, he sees the tall man in the back, and he starts saying cryptic things, and then Michael notices that he's can let go of the wheel, and the car starts driving itself. So him and the tall man can have a little heart-to-heart. And the tall man talks about how his evolution is inevitable. And then he opens the coffin in the back of the hearse and kind of just dives into this red glowing mass that's inside of the coffin. And then the glow dissolves into police lights as Reggie is getting pulled over. And he asks for his license and registration and all that. And the cop walks back to his car. And Reggie looks in the rear view to see if he's still working, and notices there's nobody there. So that's weird. Reggie gets out of the car to see what's up with the cop. There's nobody in the car. There's nobody around, but he starts hearing a thumping from the trunk. He opens the trunk, and Reggie finds the cop is all mangled. His face is, I guess, missing. I don't know. Makeup really wasn't that greatest due to the budget constraints. But anyway, the cop grabs Reggie from behind, and they have a pretty cool fight around outside and inside the cop car. Reggie ends up locking himself in the cop car, trying to grab the shotgun that's part of the police thing, but it's still locked in place, so it's just facing upward, locked. He can't unlock it. Fortunately, the maniac cop, that's why I say, because his face is all crazy, gets onto the car and starts breaking the windows and stuff. So Reggie just fires the loaded shotgun straight up and takes the guy out.
Blow me.
And Reggie leans out of the back, and in true Phantasm fashion, he gets a face full, and this time a mouthful, of the yellow blood. So that's one to mark off for your Phantasm bingo for this movie. Upcoming, and the next one, to completely take care of the cop, he puts him in the back seat, closes it, lights a flare, and throws it into the gas tank, and we get our first Phantasm exploding car. So mark another one down for that. The next morning, Michael stops his car and gets out, and he's in a very rocky desert area, like almost like a canyon. He gets out and starts walking through the canyon, which are riddled with lurkers, the evil Jawas. And they're hiding behind rocks as he walks, and they're running different places. The scene is very familiar. If you have seen Star Wars Episode 4, it's basically almost a shot for shot of R2-D2 going through the canyon in Tatooine. Nothing exciting happens. He just walks around and feels like the evil around him. So he goes back to the car, and that night, knowing he's going to no, he's going to die. Michael starts writing his last will and testament while he's being watched, but not attacked by the evil Jawas. I guess they're just curious of who he's leaving things to. Eventually, Michael falls asleep and has this weird black and white dream of him being a soldier in the Civil War, and the tall man is doing experiments on him, which jolts him awake. And he starts heading out in the desert again, trying to find any type of thing that he's been drawn to this area for, and he finds a dimensional fork in the middle of the desert. And we cut away from that, and we go back to Reggie, who is at a public rest stop, going to the bathroom. You don't see him going to the bathroom, but you see him coming out of the restroom, and he sees this blonde woman in the distance talking on a phone. Angrily, she hangs it up and leaves. We go back to Michael in the desert, and he's now trying to hang himself from a tree. It was a pretty cool shot of while he hangs himself, the tall man standing in the distance, and he can barely see him, which triggers a memory from the first movie, in a deleted scene. And instead of doing a cave-in to take care of the tall man, they basically lynch him. Michael and Jody, tie a noose around him, throw it over a tree, and they use the car to hang him, and they leave him there. Within this flashback, kid Michael is asleep, and he can hear the tall man calling out for him telepathically. He's like, "Boy, wake up, come to me, blah, 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 blah." And of course, Michael shows up, and the tall man is not dead. He's hanging there. And he basically commands him. He's like, "Cut me down." Michael's like, no, you're going to hurt people. And basically the tall man lies. He's like, I won't hurt anyone. I'll leave you alone. Something like that. He basically lies to him to get him to cut him down, and Mike cuts him down. Well, good thing that he does, because when Michael's hanging there, trying to die, the tall man cuts him down, and Michael falls to the ground. While lying there, the tall man reaches out his hand and wants to help him up, and he says there's work to do. And Michael reaches out his hand and then pulls it back, gets up and runs towards the dimensional fork. And the tall man doesn't stop him. He just gives him more cryptic words.
Careful what you look for. You just might find it.
Now, this next part is really cool. At least it is to me, because I'm a big fan of past stories. I'm a big fan of prequel stories, of origin stories. That's the word I'm looking for. Origin stories. You say prequel and people freak out. But Michael emerges not in another dimension, but what seems to be back in the past. The dimensional gate isn't one of those tuning fork things. There are 2 Tesla coils, powered by gears and steam, and it's inside this lab that has a desk just covered in notes and drawings and stuff, and a lot of unfinished experiments. And Michael walks outside and finds the tall man sitting on a porch of this Victorian house. And he greets him with a calming voice, and he's excited to see a new face.
Have you traveled far? Wouldn't you like to sit down? Let me offer you some lemonade.
And after putting things together, he realizes Michael is the first successful use of the gate that he built. And it makes you realize that this character who becomes the tall man has yet to be corrupted. And he introduces himself as Jebediah Morningside.
Jebediah Morningside.
So panicking, mainly because the tall man's being this welcoming, warm soul. Mainly he's being Angus Scrimm. The late Angus Scrimm was one of the nicest, most thoughtful people that ever worked on horror movies. And you hear that about a lot of horror icons, that they're the nicest people, and it's true. I think it takes a nice person to make a really creepy character. But he's basically being Angus Scrimm, and it's freaking out Michael. So he runs back to the lab. He tries to run through the gate, but it doesn't work. He has to start powering it up and all that stuff. But when he comes back, he looks around and sees that there are a bunch of dimensional forks that have just appeared in the desert. All right, going back to Reggie, and he's driving southeast. You thought I'd get that wrong. But he spots another car ahead of him. Any guess to who's driving the car? That's right. It was the woman he was eyeing at the rest stop. He pulls up side by side, and they're driving, and they share a glance, and then she flips her car, trying to not hit a turtle. And it rolls. Like, it's a big flip. And it's on fire, of course. And Reggie gets a chance to be the hero and save the day. And he gets her out just in time for another Phantasm car explosion. Which this one was kind of funny because Reggie was hurrying, and she's not as panicked, and he's like, it's gonna explode, and she's like, I thought cars only exploded in movies, which is kind of meta.
I thought cars only blow up like that in the movies.
And then it explodes. So throughout Phantasm 3 and the little bits you get to see of Michael, he does discover that he has a sort of like very weak telekinesis. So through this movie, he tries to hone it more. In fact, in the next scene, he's in the canyon practicing this telekinesis. He throws, some rocks at things and drops a couple boulders on the lurkers that are always watching him. But then he has an idea about building something from the engine of the hearse. And as he starts to work, Jodie finds him, and they have their first one-on-one scene since the first film, which is pretty cool. They have a small bonding moment, and Jodie tells him that his death was a lie, but it obviously wasn't, because he is a sphere, and the spheres are only made by the tall man, so it's hard to believe him. And Michael realizes this, and he's had enough of Jodie's lies, and tells him Reggie is more family than he could ever be. And I can imagine that being a hard moment for the character of Michael, because the first movie, his biggest fear was losing his brother after he lost his parents, and he lost his brother, and it made him a stronger type of character. In fact, in the second movie, he's in a damn mental institution because he's lost his entire world. And he blames it on this mortician that was after him. But Jodie still tries to gain Michael's trust. And while he's doing this, Michael's all over the car just looking for parts and stuff. And he goes into the glove compartment and he finds the dagger used by the lady in lavender from the first movie. See, it's all coming together. It's all coming around. They still talk, and we get another flashback of what really happened to Jodie. And he finally admits that he was he didn't have a car crash. He was in his room, and he was attacked by the tall man, and that's what made him into the Jodie sphere that he is now. Michael doesn't like this, doesn't like hearing this, and he runs off back towards where the dimensional fork was, and he sees that the number of forks have gone way up. It's like a field of forks. Not like dinner forks, but like the dimensional forks. We then see what Michael was building, and he's basically building his own sentinel sphere out of the engine of this hearse. Meanwhile, in Reggie's world, Reggie helps the woman who he saved, which we find out her name is Jennifer, gather what's left of her belongings and stuff. And he says he'll drive her to the next town. Well, that night, in full Reggie fashion, he pulls into a motel. It's very obvious that this hotel has been abandoned for quite some time. The doors are boarded up, and it's just very run down. They walk in, and Reggie does his best to be optimistic about everything, but she's really not into this whole horrible looking motel type thing with old moldy pizza and destroyed TV and a phone with just a big hole in it. But he tries his best to put on the Reggie charm, as it were. Later on, he lights some candles to get some light in the room. While he's doing that, Jennifer is behind a shower curtain changing. And of course, Reggie sees little hints and peeks and just gets more and more of that lovely Reggie horniness he gets. But while he's doing that, he explains the tall man and how evil he is and how he's trying to stop it and all that stuff. And she just doesn't care.
So you're telling me there's some tall man clearing out entire towns and he's got your friend?
Yeah. I've been tracking him for years.
She laughs it off. She says it's weird and you shouldn't believe in stuff like that. But he keeps trying to warn her. And she just wants to go to sleep. So they share a bed. He tries to seduce her in the Reggie way. And of course it fails. So they go to sleep. And Reggie is jolted awake in a graveyard. And he's walking around this graveyard, and a hand comes and grabs him by the back of his shoulder in tall man fashion. He turns him around, and it's Michael dressed in the tall man uniform. He's all pale, and his hair is pulled back and pulled back. But that jolts Reggie awake in the room. And then this is when we get one of the funniest and kind of creepy Reggie moments in the movie, or more in the series. Reggie looks around and notices that it's morning, and he also notices that Jennifer is no longer under the covers. She's sleeping. She's sound asleep, and she's just in her underwear and like one button on a shirt is closed, and he just kind of creepily stares at her, which is a really creepy moment for Reggie, but it's Reggie. I don't know what else you would say about that. But while he's looking at her, he notices that in the shirt, her boobs are moving. I don't really have any other way to say that, but her boobs are just moving and making kind of gooey noises. I don't know. Curious, and boy, I hope he's just curious for the same reason we are. Reggie unbuttons her shirt to reveal that her boobs have been replaced by sentinel spheres. That's right. They're just in there, and they're just like they dug in. It's just like hollowed out. And they're just there, and they're moving. And when Reggie notices, they shoot out and attack him. Running around, Reggie grabs a sledgehammer that's there, and he takes one out. And the other one gets his hand, and the fingers spear things come out, and the drill, the drill, the Phantasm drill. It gets him in his hand, and figuring out from the last movie, he grabs his tuning fork, which he's had since the first movie because he's a guitar player. He hits the tuning fork, and the sentinel sphere just explodes in his hand, not burning him whatsoever, but he still has the hole in his hand from the drill. And then Jennifer, in full-on Evil Dead fashion, attacks Reggie, and he takes care of her.
Wait! We're not done yet!
Sorry, baby. But yes, we are.
Going back to Michael, and it's night again. I don't know if it's the night, the sentinel sphere boob night, or the next night, but he's back in the back of the hearse, back in the back. That's where he's at, and he's writing a letter to Reggie, telling him how he met the not yet evil tall man and how he might be able to stop this using the dimensional forks. Basically, he wants to pull a Terminator. He wants to go back in time and kill Jebediah before he becomes the tall man. So Michael walks up to the fork, and he is momentarily stopped by the tall man.
You go where I want you to go, boy.
But Michael ignores him and jumps through dimensional fork that sends him to Hollywood Boulevard. But it's an empty Hollywood Boulevard. It's just Michael looking around, but he's being approached by the tall man. He's doing his cool, like, I'm going to get you walk that he does throughout all the movies. And he starts running away, and in out of one of the corners, Jody grabs him and pulls him. Michael asks him where they are, and Jody replies, "You mean when? And we can't stay. There's a risk of infection." So I'm guessing April 2020, empty streets, empty Hollywood streets, risk of infection. You know, it's in the future. So there you go. 1994, Don Coscarelli predicted coronavirus. All right, jumping back again to Reggie, because it's just a movie between Michael's story and Reggie's story, jumping back and forth. Reggie finally catches up to Michael and finds his car. Well, he doesn't catch up to Michael. Michael's in the future right now, but he finds Michael's car. And then Reggie realizes it's time for battle, so he gears up. He loads his quad barrel shotgun. He loads all the other handguns that he's procured over the other movies, and then he puts on his ice cream uniform from the first movie, which is now, I guess, become his battle uniform, because it's all coming full circle. Full circle. I fixed it this time. Watch. As he gets ready, the sun's going down, and he approaches the car and sees Michael's homemade sphere just sitting in the engine block. And he notices that it's very empty. There's no one around, until he starts to sense, or he smells, an evil Jawa sneaking up on him, and he takes him out Bruce Campbell style. If there's anyone to compete with Ash from the Evil Dead, it's Reggie from the Phantasm series. They both, if they ever met up, they would be an unstoppable team of evil killing badasses. But that one gunshot brought more evil Jawas to him, and a fight ensues that we don't get to see on camera, because we cut back to Michael following Jody through another fork and ending up on the beach from the Planet of the Apes.
You blew it up! Oh, damn you!
They start talking, but sense there's some kind of ruckus going on back in the desert. And they go through the fork as they see Reggie taking out the last of the Jawas. Michael and Reggie have a moment. They hug for an awkwardly long time, because Michael has to tell him some stuff telepathically. He tells Reggie not to trust Jody. And during the hug, Reggie also gives Michael the tuning fork before he decides to go see and confront Jebediah Morningside. Jody and Michael go through a fork. Again, that's all they do, is they just fork hop. But they finally get there. At the night, Jebediah has his first encounter going through the dimensional fork. It's the first time he travels dimensions, and he's doing his notes, he's getting ready, and during this we find out the whole reason Jebediah became the tall man. He was a mortician. He dealt with combat vets in the Civil War, and he wanted answers, basically, to know what happens after we die. And through his experiments, he discovered that our bodies and our souls work on different vibrations, and he has made his life work trying to find the right vibration between the living and the dead. So hence everything's a tuning fork. Everything, is run through dimensions, and the reason he can manipulate the dead and that kind of stuff. So Jebediah puts on his tall man coat and powers up the machine. And as he walks towards the gate, Jody lunges at him with the knife, and he phases right through it and realizes they're not on the same vibration. And as Michael gets back on his feet, Jebediah comes back as the tall man. He's got a sphere in his hand, and now that he has control over the dimensional vibrations. He can see Jody and Michael, and they jump through the fork,
And so it begins.
and they end up at the cemetery that Reggie had the dream of, where Michael was the tall man and that kind of stuff. At this point, Michael's pretty pissed at Jody for not telling him that they weren't going to be able to do anything, and he confronts him, and Michael realizes that his theory was true, that Jody is not on the side of good, and that he was a minion of the tall man. And he cuts him and notices that his blood is the yellow blood. But Jody gets the best of Michael, puts him through another dimensional fork, and now he has him strapped to an operating table. Not strapped, and Jody's holding him down on the operating table, and I think was the mausoleum from the third movie, where Reggie met Rocky. I don't know, all the marble hallways look alike, but I think that's what it was. And Jody's holding him down as Tall Man grabs a sphere and uses the buzzsaw component of it to do head surgery. He wants that sphere inside of Michael's head that you saw in the last one, where he's peeling off, and you see this, the chrome. You get kind of a snarky thing from the tall man. He's like,
But this won't hurt a bit. Well, maybe just a little bit.
and then he actually starts sawing into him. And Michael reaches into his pocket and tries to grab the dagger, and the dagger falls. He reaches into his other pocket and grabs the tuning fork and hits it on the side, which freezes them. And they both just stop in their tracks, because I guess it changed their dimensional vibration. Michael grabs the sphere, as buzzsaw going, and shoves it into Jody's neck, his throat, and it makes him like fall off, and he gets off the table. That broke him of the tall man's spell. What little humanity of Jody was left comes out and tells him that Jody really was dead, and all that other stuff was made up by the tall man. It's very confusing. Like, do you trust Jody? Do you not trust Jody? It's basically up to you. Was it really the best thing to do is what Jody was doing to help him stop the tall man, or was he really in his command the whole time? So I found it very, very convoluted and confusing, but it was a nice little moment that Michael had with Jody. He finally gets to see his brother rest in peace instead of being a thrall of the tall man. After that happens, the vibration wears off and the tall man unfreezes, and Michael jumps back through another fork and goes back to Reggie. As Michael runs through, a tall man comes chasing after him in his demeanor, and Reggie aims his 4-barrel shotgun right at the tall man, and the tall man is so cocky he walks up and puts his chest like right up against the thing, and everyone watching this movie is like, just shoot, just fire. And so Reggie takes a big satisfying pull of the trigger, and whoops, with a smirk, the tall man throws Reggie, I guess stunning him, because it's a good throw. It's a good throw. Probably just knocks the air out of him in a while, but he's on the ground for a little while. And then he walks over to Michael, and they stand there and banter. Michael, wants to stop things, and the tall man starts talking cryptic again about how it's inevitable that he is going to be the next step in his plan. And while they're talking, Michael's using his telekinesis to send his homemade sphere, and it shoots right in the back of the tall man's head, and it just annoys him. The tall man just pulls it out, and he continues his work. But nicely, the tall man takes Michael's sphere and goes to put it back in its resting place in the engine of the hearse, which Michael had set to explode. So we got another car explosion, but it's the tall man's hearse with the tall man with it. So that's it for the tall man. He's gone. He's not gone. Suddenly, the tall man comes out from another fork, because that's what he's shown that he can do that. His husks, his body is just husks, and he can keep bringing them out. And he subdues Michael, and he just rips the sphere right out of his head. There's no fight or anything. He just digs into his head and pulls it out. And then he goes right back through the fork with Michael's sphere. Reggie finally comes to, gets up to Michael and tells him that you're still breathing, and Michael just replies, "I'm dying, Reg." And he says he'll come back for him, as he grabs a shotgun and he leaps into the fork. And that was the big climactic battle. It's not the end of the movie. Michael is lying there, taking his last breath, and he has another cool flashback from the first movie that Coscarelli did something really cool. He took this one scene, and I don't know if it was like the scene of the end of the first movie, because it felt very final. But it's a nighttime scene. Michael's standing there as a kid on a street corner of the town, and Reggie pulls up and gives him a ride. And they're talking about how it's a nice night. And telepathically, Michael's talking to both of them, or at least whispering to both of them, saying, I'm not dead. And Reggie's confused. He's like, "Did you hear something?" And Michael just looks at him and says, "It's just the wind." And then they roll off into the darkness, and the credits roll. Yeah, this ends unlike any Phantasm movie. It does not have the tall man coming back, saying something like, "Boy," some creature grabbing someone and disappearing into the darkness. This was supposed to be the final movie. And it lends itself to very much different interpretations of what was supposed to happen. Did Michael die, or did Michael use his telepathy to change the events to make him not die and fight and actually take care of the tall man in the past? We don't know. Well, we didn't know what the end was going to be until 18 years later, when we got Phantasm Ravager. So what did I think of Phantasm IV? It's actually a really good movie for the budget that it had. Coscarelli did everything he could to make a cohesive story to connect the other two movies that he didn't even think he was going to make. And jokingly saying that he was going to do it just for money, he ended up making, in my opinion, the second best Phantasm movie that was released. Yes, it's got some weird twists and turns, and it's got strange time travel things, and that whole thing with Jodie not being able to trust him and then being able to trust him, and then back and forth with that. That was interesting and borderline unnecessary, but in the grand scheme of things, Phantasm IV is a damn good movie. I dare anyone with $650,000 to make a Hollywood film of a franchise that's already known and do it well. And I'll see you when I do my next review, which will be Phantasm Ravager. And that will end the Phantasm part of our countdown to Halloween. So I'll see you next time.